My name is Natalie, and I never imagined the path I'd walk would lead me here. I mean, if you had asked me a year ago, I'd have told you my life was pretty set. I had a solid job as a pharmacist at a well-established pharmacy, working regular hours, and life was easy. But all of that changed with one mistake. A simple slip of the hand, a misread label, and an elderly man ended up in the hospital. What was supposed to be a small mistake, one that I didn't even notice at the time, spiraled into something bigger. I remember his daughter's face when she came in to get his medication the next day, and then, well, the rest is history. I couldn't work in that field after that. The guilt was crushing. I thought I could outrun it. Find a new job, start over somewhere fresh. And so I ended up here, a small, rundown 24-hour pharmacy tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. Honestly, I never thought this place would be any better than where I came from. But let's back up a bit. Before all of this, I met Sam. He was funny, kind, and just so normal. I used to think I could never have that normal life. But he showed me what it felt like to be loved, really loved. We'd spend hours talking, laughing, and watching movies together. It was simple, but it was everything I needed at the time. After a while, we decided to move in together. Nothing big, no big fancy place, just a tiny apartment with white walls and a creaky floor. But we made it ours. We painted the walls, bought mismatched furniture, and even started a little garden in the window. I'd always laugh at how Sam would insist on fixing everything that broke, even though half the time it made things worse. Like that one time he tried to fix the sink and ended up flooding the entire kitchen. He wasn't perfect, but who is? The more time we spent together, the more it felt like maybe I was ready to settle down, like maybe this is what I was meant to do. But that was before everything, before the accident, before I had to leave it all behind. As I settled into my new job, the manager casually mentioned a few rules that seemed oddly specific. "Make sure to follow them," she said with a knowing glance. "It's for your safety." The pharmacy wasn't anything special, not by any means. The shelves were dusty, and the place always smelled faintly of antiseptic and something else, something old, like it hadn't been cleaned in years. But when I started, I thought maybe it could be different. I could prove I could do something right again. So, I threw myself into the work, focusing on getting everything perfect, making sure every prescription was exactly right. But the place was different from what I expected. There was something off about it, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up sometimes. But I kept my head down and did what I had to do. The nights were quiet, mostly. No one ever came in late at night, except the occasional regular. Then came that night. It was one of those nights that felt wrong from the start. I remember it clearly. I was just getting ready to close up. The last few customers had trickled out, and the clock was ticking toward 10 p.m. That was when I first heard it, the faint sound of someone clearing their throat. I looked up from the counter and froze. There he was, an elderly man, standing by the door. Now I knew this man. I recognized him immediately, though I didn't know his name. He'd been a regular at my old pharmacy, and the guilt rushed back like a tidal wave. The man, he was the one who died. The one I had given the wrong medication to. The one whose daughter cried when I couldn't fix what I had done. I didn't understand how or why, but there he was, standing in front of me, just as real as anyone else. I stood frozen for a moment, not sure if my mind was playing tricks on me. But there he was, staring at me with those eyes that I could never forget. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to apologize, to explain myself, but my voice wouldn't come. The man reached out a trembling hand, and that's when I saw it. The prescription slip clutched in his fingers. That's when I remembered the rule. The first rule I had learned when I started working here. Never give medication to someone who doesn't have a prescription for it. But this wasn't just any person, it was him. It felt like everything around me was spinning. But I had to follow the rule, didn't I? I had no choice. I couldn't help him. I took a step back, my hands shaking. "I can't give this to you," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't say anything. He just kept staring at me, those eyes full of something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Sadness? I didn't know. And then, without a word, he vanished. I I remember feeling this weird pressure, like the air in the room had thickened. Was it really him? Or was it just my mind playing tricks on me after all the guilt I carried? I don't know. But I do know this. I couldn't outrun my past, no matter how hard I tried. That's when I heard it. The back door creaked open, and I could see the faint outline of a figure standing just beyond the threshold. My heart raced, and I froze in place. It couldn't be him again, could it? I wanted to go check, but I remembered the rules. There was no way I could go near the back door, not without following the one thing I had to do to keep safe. Always lock the back door at exactly 10 p.m. The next few days felt heavier than usual. I couldn't shake the image of that man from my mind, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. The pharmacy felt colder, like the walls were closing in on me, and the hours passed by slower than they ever had before. It was like I was trapped in a loop, doing the same thing every night, knowing that something was off but not knowing how to fix it. I didn't tell anyone about what happened with the elderly man. Sam would have tried to rationalize it, tell me it was just my guilt playing tricks on me. But I knew better. Something was wrong with this place, and I was starting to realize it wasn't just me. I remember the first time I noticed the clocks. At first, it was just a passing thought, but after a while, I realized they were always off, never on time. The minute hand would jump forward a few minutes, like it had a mind of its own. Sometimes the lights would flicker, and the sound of whispers would come from the dark corners of the pharmacy. One night, as I was preparing the final batch of prescriptions before closing, I heard the noise again. The whispering. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the old pipes or the wind. But the noise grew louder, like someone was talking right behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. That's when I heard it. The back door creaked open, and I could see the faint outline of a figure standing just beyond the threshold. My heart raced, and I froze in place. It couldn't be him again, could it? I wanted to go check, but I remembered the rules. There was no way I could go near the back door, not without following the one thing I had to do to keep safe. Always lock the back door at exactly 10 p.m. I wasn't sure why it was so important, but it was the one rule I'd been told not to break. There was something sinister about it, something that made me uneasy. But I had to do it. So, I walked over to the back door and locked it as the clock ticked past 10. I didn't feel any safer, though. The whispering stopped, but the air felt thick with something I couldn't understand. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the door handle, hoping it was just my imagination. But when I turned around, I saw him again. The elderly man. His eyes locked with mine. He wasn't speaking, but the expression on his face told me everything I needed to know. I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, but eventually he turned and walked away. When he disappeared, the air in the pharmacy felt a little lighter. I remember looking at the clock, and sure enough, it was exactly 10:01. Had I really just locked the door at the exact moment? I didn't know, but I was too shaken to think straight. I didn't sleep much after that. Every night felt like a battle, and every time I closed my eyes, I could see the man's face again. The man I had failed. The man I couldn't save. The guilt weighed on me like a 100-pound anchor, pulling me deeper and deeper into this never-ending nightmare. Sam noticed. He'd always been the first to pick up on things. He asked if something was wrong, but I lied. I didn't want him to think I was crazy, especially when I didn't understand it myself. So, I told him I was just tired, just adjusting to the new schedule, and he seemed to buy it. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep this secret forever. Then one night, as I was closing up, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was faint at first, like a muffled sob. I thought I was imagining things, but the sound grew louder, clearer. It was a child crying. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. It was impossible. There was no one around, no kids anywhere near the pharmacy, especially at this hour. But then I remembered the rule. If you hear children crying outside the pharmacy, don't go to the door. It was the one rule I hadn't fully understood at first, but as the crying grew louder, I knew exactly what it meant. I wasn't supposed to open the door. It didn't matter how badly I wanted to help, I couldn't. I had to follow the rules. But my heart ached as I stood there, listening to the desperate cries. I knew something was terribly wrong, and I felt it in my gut, like a deep, gnawing fear. I wanted to help, but I knew I couldn't. The crying continued for what felt like hours, echoing through the pharmacy. And still, I didn't go near the door. I couldn't even explain why, but something told me that if I opened that door, if I went to investigate, I wouldn't just be letting in a child. I would be letting in something else. Something that wasn't human. The crying stopped as suddenly as it had started. The silence that followed was deafening. I remember standing there for a long time, just listening to the stillness. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep doing this. Something had to give. I had to find a way to fix what I had broken. The nights seemed to blur together, each one dragging longer than the last. The pharmacy's strange, dark corners felt even more suffocating, and the whispering continued. It was as though the air itself was watching me, waiting for me to slip up. I tried to focus on my work, checking prescriptions, stocking shelves, but every step I took, I could feel it, the weight of everything I'd done. I hadn't seen the man for a few days, but I felt him there, lurking at the edge of my vision. I kept expecting him to appear, but somehow he never did. That didn't make me feel any safer, though. It only made me more paranoid. One night, I was cleaning the counter when I felt a chill sweep across the room. The lights flickered. Not the usual gentle flicker from the old bulbs, but something more deliberate, like the pharmacy was warning me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I glanced up, half expecting to see the man standing there. But there was nothing. Then the air shifted, and I knew. It wasn't just the man I was afraid of. It was something else. I turned to the hallway that led to the back, and I saw something move. A shadow. But it wasn't human. It didn't have a shape, just an unnatural presence. My heart started pounding in my chest, and before I knew it, my feet carried me to the storage room door. I couldn't stop myself. The moment I touched the handle, I remembered the rule. Don't go near the storage room at night. The warning hit me hard, like a slap to the face. I'd been told about it when I started, but now, standing there, feeling the coldness seep into my bones, I understood it. I wasn't supposed to go near the storage room, ever. But I was already too close. My hand hovered over the door handle, and a sickening feeling washed over me. I didn't know what was inside, but something told me that if I opened that door, I wouldn't be able to come back. I pulled my hand away, trembling, and backed away slowly. I didn't look back. The shadow remained in the hallway, but it didn't follow me. It was like it was waiting for me to break the rules, to take that step into the dark unknown. I didn't dare. That night, I locked up quickly, trying to get out before anything else could happen. But as I walked home, I couldn't shake the image of that shadow, of the feeling that it had followed me. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking behind me. But the streets were empty, just like always. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I found myself at the pharmacy earlier than usual, trying to get everything in order before the night shift started. But something was off. The pharmacy was quieter than usual, and when I looked into the back, I noticed something strange. The storage room door was ajar. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the door. The storage room door, the one I had avoided with all my willpower just the night before, was wide open. I didn't know how long it had been like that or who could have opened it, but the sense of dread that filled my chest was overwhelming. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the gap between the door and the frame, my mind racing. I could hear my breath growing heavier, my palms sweating. I knew I shouldn't go near it. I knew what I'd been told. But this was different. Something was calling me. It was like the pharmacy itself was beckoning me, urging me to cross that line. I could feel the weight of the rule pressing down on me, but I couldn't ignore the pull. I stepped closer, my body moving against my better judgment. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and I couldn't help but wince at the sound. The darkness inside the storage room swallowed the light from the hallway, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I don't know what I was expecting to find. A pile of old boxes? Some forgotten supplies? But as I stepped into the room, I saw it. The shadows were different in here. They moved. The walls seemed to shift and bend, and the air felt thick with something that wasn't supposed to be there. And then, I saw something else. It was a figure, standing in the far corner. It was hard to make out at first, just a dark shape, like a person standing perfectly still. But when I took another step forward, I could see it clearer. The elderly man. His face was just like it had been the night he died. But there was no recognition in his eyes, no hint of the life he'd once had. He was a shell, an empty vessel. The room felt colder, and I could hear the whispers again. But this time, they weren't coming from the walls. They were coming from him. The man's lips moved, but no sound came out. It was as though he was speaking to me, trying to tell me something I couldn't understand. My body refused to move. My feet were frozen to the floor, and my breath caught in my throat. That's when I remembered the rule. Never give medication to someone who doesn't have a prescription for it. The words echoed in my mind, louder than the whispers, louder than the rush of fear that clouded my thoughts. It wasn't about the pharmacy. It wasn't about the rules that kept me trapped. It was about him, about the mistake I made, the mistake I couldn't undo. I had to fix this. I had to make things right. But the more I tried to move, the more the room seemed to close in on me. The shadows stretched, the whispers grew louder, and the man's eyes, they weren't empty anymore. They were full of judgment, full of anger. And in that moment, I realized the truth. This wasn't about redemption. It was about something far worse. Something I couldn't escape. The room seemed to close in on me as the shadows danced around, reaching out like cold fingers. The whispers were louder now, deafening in my ears, but no matter how much I tried to block them out, they crawled deeper into my mind. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It was like I was stuck in the moment, frozen in time, unable to move or scream. My eyes locked onto the man, no, the figure, that once resembled the elderly patient I had killed. But this wasn't him anymore. It wasn't even close. His face twisted, contorted in ways that felt unnatural, like something had clawed through it from the inside out. His mouth opened, and the whispers turned into words. But they weren't words I could understand. They were guttural, distorted, like they came from the depths of a nightmare. I could feel every inch of my body screaming at me to run, but I was trapped. My feet wouldn't move, my legs wouldn't carry me away. And that's when the silence hit. All at once, everything stopped. The whispers, the shadows, the icy cold grip on my chest. It was like the world had hit pause. And in that terrifying stillness, I heard it. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps coming closer. I wanted to scream, to turn and run, but I couldn't. I looked toward the door, praying that someone would walk in. Someone, anyone, to pull me out of this nightmare. But there was no one. The footsteps grew louder, and I felt the temperature in the room plummet even further. The lights flickered once again, casting erratic shadows across the storage room. That's when I saw it, his eyes. His dead, hollow eyes staring at me, filled with an accusation I couldn't escape. I stumbled backward, heart racing, but my hand brushed against something. It was the door handle. It was there, so close, but I couldn't reach it. I knew if I touched that handle, if I stepped out of that room, I'd be free. But I couldn't take that step. I couldn't face what was waiting for me outside. The truth was already here. And as the figure in front of me seemed to inch closer, I realized I had never really escaped it. The whispers came again, this time clearer, more insistent. It was as if they were trying to tell me something I had already known but refused to accept. I wasn't here to fix anything. I wasn't here to redeem myself. I was here because I hadn't learned the most important rule of all. And that's when I remembered the rule. Always lock the back door at exactly 10 p.m. It hit me like a slap to the face. I hadn't locked it. I hadn't followed that rule. That's why the pharmacy felt wrong, why the shadows and the whispers were growing stronger. I wasn't just dealing with my past mistakes. I was dealing with something far more dangerous. Something that had been waiting for me. Something that was about to break free. I had broken the rule. And now it was coming for me. Barely remember how I made it out of the storage room. All I know is that the moment I stepped back into the main aisle, the lights flickered one last time. For a brief second, everything went dark. The whole pharmacy felt as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. My heart was in my throat, pounding in my chest, and I couldn't seem to catch my breath. I knew I had to lock the back door. I had to. If I didn't want to know what would happen. But my body felt like it was moving on its own, like something was pulling me in a direction I didn't want to go. The storage room door slammed shut behind me, almost violently. I flinched, but I didn't dare look back. The pharmacy was eerily quiet, but the stillness was only an illusion. I could feel it in my bones, something was coming, and it wasn't good. I ran to the back of the pharmacy, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I reached for the back door, trembling, and that's when I saw it. Through the small window in the door, I could see something out there, standing in the alleyway. A figure. I couldn't make out who or what it was, but I could feel its presence. It was watching me. I froze. The moment I had feared had arrived. The whispers started again, low and sinister, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the very floor beneath me. They were louder now, almost deafening. I knew what I had to do. I had to lock the door. But I couldn't take my eyes off the figure outside. It was getting closer. I turned the handle with trembling hands, locking the door just as the clock struck 10. But the figure didn't stop moving. It came closer, moving with unnatural speed, its shape shifting with every step. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel the weight of its gaze pressing on me. My heart was pounding in my ears. And then I heard it, the sound of the lock clicking into place. I breathed a sigh of relief, but it was short-lived, because I could still feel it outside. The door was locked, but it wasn't enough. It never was. The figure outside was still there waiting, watching. I couldn't escape it. I had broken the rule, and now there was no way out. And that's when I heard something else, a faint scratching at the back door, like nails dragging across the wood. A slow, deliberate sound that made my blood run cold. The whispers had stopped. There was no more waiting. Whatever it was, whatever I had unleashed, was coming inside. I was rooted to the spot, my mind racing. The scratching sound on the back door grew louder, more frantic, as if whatever was outside was desperate to get in. I wanted to move, to run, but my body refused to obey. The fear had paralyzed me. My hand was still on the door handle, and I could feel the cold metal beneath my fingers, the steady vibration of whatever was outside trying to break through. The silence that followed was even worse, a deafening, suffocating quiet that made my skin crawl. I don't know how long I stood there, too scared to breathe, but when I finally dared to glance over my shoulder, I saw it. The elderly man. The one I had killed. He was standing in the corner of the pharmacy, his presence like a shadow that stretched across the entire room. His eyes, once lifeless and vacant, now gleamed with an unnatural light, and his lips curled into a twisted grin. His form seemed to flicker, like he wasn't entirely real, like he was being pulled in and out of existence. My heart hammered in my chest, and I could feel the sweat on my brow as I tried to look away. But I couldn't. I could hear the whispers again, but this time, they weren't coming from the walls or the ceiling. They were coming from him. His voice was hollow, like an echo from the past. "You did this," he murmured, his voice low and crackling like dry leaves. "You killed me." I closed my eyes, but it didn't matter. His voice was in my head now, impossible to escape. The guilt, the shame, it was all flooding back. I had tried to outrun it, tried to bury it deep inside, but it had followed me here. It was here, in this cursed pharmacy, and it wasn't letting me go. But then, through the haze of fear and guilt, something inside me shifted. I remembered the rule. I had failed to follow it once before. I couldn't make that mistake again. Not now. Not when I was so close. I turned slowly, forcing myself to face the back door. The scratching had stopped, but I could still feel its presence, like a shadow hovering just outside. I knew what I had to do. I glanced back at the man, no, the figure, in the corner, my eyes narrowing as I spoke the words aloud, not caring if he could hear them. "I won't make the same mistake again." I stepped away from the door and moved toward the counter, feeling the weight of every step. I had to fix this. I had to make it right. I grabbed the phone, dialing the emergency number with shaky hands. The operator answered, but my voice came out as a whisper, barely audible. "I need help. There's something wrong with this place, with me." But as the operator's voice came through the line, I heard something else. The whispers were back, louder now, overlapping with the operator's voice. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I spun around. The man was there again, his face inches from mine. His eyes locked onto mine, his grin widening. The whispers faded, replaced by the same words. "You can't escape. Not this time." I closed my eyes, willing myself to wake up, but there was no escape. This was real. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't here just to redeem myself. I wasn't just here to make up for the past. I was here to fix the mistake that had never really been mine to begin with. And that's when I knew. The moment I had been dreading, the moment the rules had been building up to, had finally arrived. The lights flickered one last time. And as they went out, the whispers stopped. I don't remember when I fell asleep, but when I woke up, everything felt different. The air was thick with something I couldn't name, but it was no longer the same cold, oppressive feeling that had hung over the pharmacy for so long. The shadows were still there, lurking in the corners of my vision, but they didn't feel like threats anymore. They felt distant, like they were part of something I couldn't reach. I rose from the floor, my body sore from whatever had happened the night before. The pharmacy was quiet now, disturbingly so. The soft hum of the refrigerator in the back was the only sound that filled the empty space. It felt like a dream, like everything was suspended in time, waiting for something to happen. I stumbled toward the door, drawn to it by some invisible force. When I opened it, the world outside felt different. The city streets were empty, the usual hum of traffic and life replaced by an eerie stillness. I stepped outside, and the cold air hit me like a slap in the face. But I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel anything. As I stood there, gazing out into the city, I heard a soft voice behind me, familiar and warm. It was the voice of the man, no, the spirit who had haunted me for so long. But this time it was gentle, like a distant memory. "You're free now," the voice said. "You've redeemed yourself." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew what had happened. The rules had been broken, but they had been broken in a way that freed me. I had faced the truth. I had confronted my guilt, my fear, and the consequences of my actions. And somehow, in the end, it had been enough. But I knew something else too. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into that pharmacy. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer had control over me. I had taken back my life. And as I turned to face the quiet city, I realized that the pharmacy would be there waiting. It would always be there, like a shadow in the corner of my mind. But I had learned the most important rule. I had learned to let go. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for daily horror stories that get creepier every night.